All right, good morning and welcome to day 3 of West 2023. I need a little bit more enthusiasm. I mean, okay. Okay. All right, good deal. Um, and I'm Mike Black. I'm Vice President for Defense for AFC International, and I'm honored to introduce our speakers today. They're going to talk about joint all-domain command and control, evolutionary versus revolutionary. The elephant is in the room. We've got Mr. Johnson, T.J. Johnson, that is going to lead this discussion. He'll introduce the rest of his team. And I think you are going to take questions too, or
I believe we're taking questions.
yeah,
Right,
and they're going to take questions. So thank you for your attendance today for this opening session, and over to you, TJ, for intro of your team and the topic.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for that. Hey, my name is Thomas Johnson, TJ. I'm the Senior Principal Engineer for Command and Control at Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity, or MCTSA. With me today is Rick Bose, who's from our Warfighter Support Division, and then, of course, the famous Captain Eric Perez. If you don't know him, you need to know him. He's the best that we got. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, a couple of things. I'll be talking about coalition interoperability. Rick will be following up with me talking about some of the work we're doing with TAC and how the Warfighter Support Center has introduced and really shepherded the TAC capabilities for the Marine Corps. And then finally, Captain Perez is going to be talking about where we are in JADC2 and some of the work that he's been spearheading and leading and helping us to be kind of the lead agency, really helping out and facilitating McWill and some of the work that we're doing. So with that said, we'll go to the next slide. But before, we had to just level set some people. For those who don't know, MCTSA is in Camp Pendleton, California. We are a subordinate element of Marine Corps Systems Command. We have a fourth emerging main task, right? So we have our test. We're primarily test and certification, or test and engineering. We have the highest concentration of advanced degrees within the Marine Corps. We have a workforce of roughly 150 Marines and 150 civilians. And then, so we have those two things. Then secondly, our second line of effort is our warfighter support, where Rick comes from. That's where most of the Marines will know and see and interact with MCTSA. That's our 24/7 support, always on call, always on duty. They're there when those Marines need that information. They forward deploy, they echelon in with the Marines, and they echelon out. They bring that information back to our engineering, where the expertise. So that engineering piece of it, we're that interface. An engineering interface is the interface to the program office. So as we're getting that information back from warfighter support, we're integrating it into our engineering and our designs. We're helping to inform the program offices on where they need to make some risk decisions and things like that to inform their decisions. And then finally, where we're now emerging is we're really taking on some of the work supporting McWill and experimentation. So that's really been what we've been seeing for the last 2 years. A lot of growth. Obviously, if you're here, you're talking about JADC2, you have seen the head nods, you know what it is, or you think you know what it is, or we hope we know what it is, one of those things. Eric and his team has really been taking that concept and the construct and building it into some things that we can operationalize and then share and validate some concepts from McWill where they can send it out to the rest of the force. So that's really the 4 lines of effort. So, and I kind of walked through that there. I'm going to highlight there, I'm going to be talking about how we expand, when we talk about help the program manager expand the trade space and really in the coalition space. So next slide, please. So we had the honor of having the communications officer from 24th MU at MCTSA about 2 weeks ago. For those of you that are familiar with the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, they were the unit that was in Afghanistan helping to get those civilians and everybody and our Americans out of Afghanistan. I'm sure everyone saw the news. We all saw it. We saw the pictures of the Marines out there. We saw the throngs of Afghans trying to run and save their lives and losing their lives on the planes and stuff like that. But he gave us some really good insight and some of the things, the challenges they had, right? They had unreliable comms. They had a lack of reciprocity. And what that means is, for us, is that, hey, we have a Marine Corps network. Well, we had 28 other nations out there, so I had to get reciprocity to talk to 28 other nations. So that means I had to get permission to talk to the French and the Germans and the World Food Program and so on and so forth. And while they're trying to do the paperwork and fill out these forms, you all are seeing this real time mass of people really trying. So they're trying to they're trying to actually survive at the same time that they've got to fill out a SAR form because I got to go to another account. I got to get another account. So that was reality. Lack of mission partner interoperability. When we talk about mission partners, we're talking about not just our joint partners. We're also talking about our coalition and allies. We're also talking about our, intergovernmental, State Department. Obviously, that was a State Department mission. So how are the Marines set up to talk to the State Department, right? Do we train to that standard? A MU does, but do we test to that standard, right? So that's the sense that we have. Also, right, we had World Food Program, Doctors Without Borders. We had, the Red Cross. We had all the media organizations. Who do you think they were trying to call to get on those planes, right? Who do you think they saw? They said, there's a Marine out there. Let me go figure that guy out, right? And what happened was there was a complete breakdown of that communication. So that Signal, and you all probably, I'm sure people in the crowd knew this as well. Signal and WhatsApp became the command and control capability of that environment. And what we got was from Major Dom Schiavati. He said that the COP, the Common Operational Picture, was an S2 Marine with a PowerPoint. That was the COP. So as we talk through this, what I say to people, right, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we spent $1 trillion in 20 years. And at the time of need, the best we could do for that Marine was PowerPoint. Right, so that's so I say that to say that's the start point of where, as we move into Indo-PACOM and we look at malign actors across the globe, right? We're talking about near peers. We have to acknowledge that that's our start point. So how do we? So that's the bad. The bad news is that's the start point. The good news is we're here to talk about what things we can think about, or at least things that I think we can think about. Next slide, please. So again, so my takeaway from that, and I think the Marines will agree, that we need joint and combined interoperability. We need to prioritize that as part of as part of how the Marines and Expeditionary Force is going to work. The first people, they're going to be the first point of contact with those mission partners. So, like I said before, what we're working on currently is we're doing some work with McWill and Headquarters Marine Corps C4 to look at mission partner exchanges for real-time data. So as we look again, as we're looking at it, right, the thing that you have to look at for all of that, all the stuff that I just mentioned, right, it's not technology that's the problem, right? Policy drives technology, right? I can only pace as far as the policy will allow me to go, right? But the thing about it is my thoughts are, policy is not immutable. We treat it as it's immutable, but it's just a bunch of people like you and me just writing up the best idea we had at the time. That's what it is, right? And the policy often breaks when reality hits it, and that's what we saw. That's why WhatsApp and Signal were what was happening, and no one got NJP'd for not using the program of record, right? So that's how it works. So again, we're looking at data centricity. That is very much in our wheelhouse. I think that's very much where JADC2 wants to go. And we're looking at our focus obviously on Indo-PACOM. So we're looking at those. So now it's a different set of partners, right? The benefit of what we had in Iraq and Afghanistan is that we're pretty much running under a NATO, allies, UCOM kind of construct. So right, we had Five Eyes that we were working with. We had the ABCANs kind of construct. Right, these are people that we know. And we make agreements through treaties. Right, through the NATO treaty that sets the standards. Now, when we move to Indo-PACOM, we don't have that same sort of construct. So now it's a bunch of bilateral agreements. Right, so I have one agreement with Korea. I have one agreement with Japan. I have another agreement with the Philippines. Right, so now that becomes 4 or 5 different networks. So let's think about echeloning that down to that lowest echelon, that tactical echelon, for them to be able to talk with their adjacents in this island chain. In our today's construct, that's 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 physical enclaves that I would have to, because that's the way the policy works, right? That's going to break, not only going to break the back of the Marine just trying to carry that stuff in, it's going to break command and control, right? And that commanders are not going to have centralized command and control. It's going to be decentralized, it's going to be disaggregated, and when we're talking about near peers that have the ability to target and detritus at scale and mass, that's not survivable. So, next slide. So, it all starts with data. What you see here is we've been working with NPS, Naval Postgraduate School, and what we were able to do, what we're seeing is you're seeing about 10,000 requirements that we put in from about 8 or 9 programs of record. And we did a word cloud to say, hey, what's the similarities in these, right? And you can see message, data, list, user, appendix, right? As you look at that, you can kind of start to see these are the things that are similar against our programs of record. So now that I know what the data is, now that I know what you're required to do, I can start to build my test cases. I can start to build my infrastructure. I can start to build my comm process around what's similar. So it all starts with data. So as we move forward, we got to move away from the net-centric to the data-centric, right? So this is kind of what we're looking at. This is kind of what I just described. You see this island chain, you're looking at us doing kill web stuff. And then you can see, hey, I've got this mission partner that I have to get the cop and sensor data to. In today's construct, that's not possible in our current construct, right? We don't man, field, train, and equip to coalition. We don't prioritize mission partners as our standard operational procedure. It becomes by exception and by extension, right? So then what we find is that we have Marines in the field having to scrounge equipment, have to scrounge personnel, have to scrounge to get access to the ports and protocols to be able to enable that. And again, that's acceptable in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we had overmatch in every domain. That's not acceptable when I'm dealing with a near peer or a peer that has the ability to outpace me in certain areas. So how do we make that seamless? So next slide. Right. So the takeaway that I hope as I talk through my part here is, number one, prioritize interoperability. Develop to the standards. Right. Develop to the standards. Right. A lot of vendors are out here. A lot of my friends are out here. I see a lot of people that I've known and seen over the years, and I'm glad that you guys are out here. Develop to the standards. Bringing in your capability and it doesn't meet the standards doesn't help because that has reverberating effects on how we meet and work with our partners because they're building to the standards. So we have to make sure it meets the standards. Pace has to be a consideration in any product, right? It's not going to, if we see that, again, using Afghanistan as that start point, the waveforms that we train with are not necessarily going to be the waveforms that I'm going to be able to use. I need to be able to use every waveform in the spectrum. Whether it's my mill stuff, whether it's the civilian waveforms, whatever's out there, if I can use it to find and trick the adversary, I want to use it. That's going to be my weapon system, right? Whatever waveform is out there, because I know the adversary is going to do the same, given the opportunity. And then again, deployable expeditionary is a must. SWAP, we've got to think about it, right? Again, as I said before, 5, 10, 15 physical networks, not survivable. I've got to put that down. I got to have a single pane of glass. I need to have one deployable capability. At the end of the day, I think this is the next one. Go here, slide down. Is it easy to integrate into existing programs? So that's what we kind of say, in professional speak. What I would say in human speak is, can my lance corporals, can my sergeants, can my staff sergeants do these 5 things? Number one, can they deploy it? Can they configure it? Can they operate it? Can they maintain it? Can they defend it? That's what I'm going to ask a Marine to do with a rifle. That's what I'm going to ask them to do with those C2 systems, right? If you can't do those 5 things as a Marine with a rifle, you're not a Marine. So you have to be able to do that same thing with your information weapon systems. So I think this is takes my piece away. I think next slide there. This is big data. So again, I'll end off with this piece, right? In the past, we talked about tracks and overlays and kind of the standard things that we've done for the last 20 years. That's not where we're going. Then the integrated mission data fabric, all information, again, for those of you that haven't read MCPD-8 information, I recommend that you all do that. It'll help you all in the industry to understand where the Marine Corps is thinking and where they're going. And this is the challenge. I need to bring all of that information dynamically. I need to bring it real time and dynamically to the end user, to the person that needs to action that information to have a positive effect on the mission as directed. So these are the things we're looking at. Again, this isn't magic. These are the warfighting functions that every Marine trains to. You train to the standard. Anyone that's been a Marine knows these 7 warfighting functions and know their part and role in it. So how do we bring that to that Marine again to be able to execute? I leave you off with this one thing as we walk. I love the Marine Corps and I love being a government civilian. But this is what I'm going to tell you. The average government civilian is 48 years old. The average Marine is 23. We're not the same. And unfortunately, I'm above average as of a couple of months ago. So when we think about this, I look around this audience, think about your use case. Think about what that 23-year-old can do and what they know. They're probably more technologically savvy than we are, number one. Number two, they don't need instructions to do what they need to do, right? So if it takes a lot of instructions, a lot of documentation, that 23-year-old Marine is probably not going to do it, right? I can tell you 20 years ago that 23-year-old Marine probably was going to do it. I can tell you 40 years ago that 23-year-old Marine probably was going to do it. 23-year-old Marines do what 23-year-old Marines do. They accept orders, they execute to the mission. So I think I'm finished. Next slide. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rick. Rick's got the TAC, and he's going to give you guys a very exciting presentation. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, TJ. Yeah, that definitely leads off into a challenge that we're all trying to accomplish here, at least you all are, and that's interoperability issues. And sometimes the solution isn't necessarily a vendor trying to sell something. Sometimes it's something that's free, such as the tactical assault kit So I'm Rick Bopes. I'm the action officer for the Marine Corps Configuration Steering Board member at MCTISA. Next slide. Thank you. So one of the first questions we always get is, what is TAC? So I'll give you the basic definition, and that's up there on the board. Map-based situational awareness software platform. But it's much more than that, right? Because you have out-of-the-box capabilities unlike any other current POR. You have a civilian variant, which is actually Team Awareness Kit. You can go right now on your iPhone or your Android and download this. ATAC for Android, ITAC for iOS. You have TAC Gov, you have TAC Mil. All of these are federatable, right? There's 350,000 current users of TAC throughout the entire world. So immediately, if you go into a country, you can federate with those individuals. You can share situational awareness, you can pull data, you can pull sensing, you can make sense. On the Mil side, obviously that's where we're all playing in. I'm sure a lot of the vendors here today are building some sort of plugin for your program to inject information or pull information from the TAC ecosystem. The next question I always get is why TAC? So, okay, rearrange a little bit. Configuration steering board. So this is a 13-member team right now that's spread across Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of State. MCTISA, Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity, we joined it last year, the first Marine Corps representation on this board. And what we do is we strategically steer the TAC core products in the direction that best fits the needs of the Marine Corps. So it's a investment that we made last year, and we're going to continue to do so. So you see there's a small price tag, $750K for us to sit on that board to steer the direction of a product that best fits the needs of the Marine Corps. Obviously, all the guys and gals that are floating around the world just waiting for something to happen. When that does happen, you have to have a source of communication that's out of the box, that can be transport agnostic, and that's what TAC provides. So some of the things that we've done here at MCTISA is we've integrated the TAC ecosystem into systems of systems tests. So we're testing it alongside C2PC, JTCW, TISO, et cetera. At the same time, we own the only Blue Force cyber assessment team. So what we have done is adversarial assessments of TAC. We provide that information back to the TAC Product Center. Being a steering board member, it means fix it now. TAC products are on a continuous delivery cycle, modernized, agile software development, which you can produce fixes rapidly within 3 months generally, but they have been known to fix products or issues, vulnerabilities within 12 hours. The graph here shows our website hits within 72 hours of launching a TAC website or a TAC page on a CAC Anonymous website. So 38% of the users were accessing TAC. They were looking for information. They were pulling our videos down. They were pulling our documentation down because they want to utilize TAC at the tactical edge. It's not necessarily to bench programs of record, but what they're doing right now in the littorals is communication with joint services and host nations and joint allies. Next slide. So back to the question of why TAC. So it is open source. It is government off-the-shelf software. It is an ecosystem. So an example of the ecosystem is here on the board. So you have ATAC for your Android, ITAC for anyone on the iOS, WinTAC, TAC server that kind of draws and pulls it all together and adding a line of security there. But one of the big features is plug-in development. So what we've done at MCTISA is we've gotten our feet wet for developing plugins rapidly. So as we see a use case for the warfighter, we see a use case for a program of record, we can develop an app within days or weeks and have a DevSec internal pipeline that allows us to deploy that immediately. Along the lines of that is we can work with programs of record to make their programs available at the tactical edge on handheld devices. So maybe a legacy program that's still relevant, but just heavy, we can create a plugin and have that deployable inside of the TAC ecosystem. The next slide. Hit on this a little bit, TJ did. Obviously, shared awareness is huge. Out of the box, another question of why TAC. This is why there's 10 current foreign military sales cases. That means those 10 countries can have TAC Gov. That means we can share instantaneously plugins, we can share development, we can share essay, we can share communication. Now, all the other ones that aren't a part of this, we are actively working to get them as members of the FMS portfolio. So Indonesia, Japan, Thailand, and other Indo-PACOM countries all becoming a part of this larger program of record, which TAC provides. And lastly, for the why, connectivity issues, right? So transport agnostic, you don't have to rely on green gear, you don't have to rely on military or commercial satellite. You can use infrastructure, local infrastructure, SIM, Wi-Fi, etc. All of this stuff is capable. It's out of the box. It's functionality that isn't necessarily existent in most command and control, communications, SA systems. But TAC has this connectivity capability here. And all of this, all of the why and all of the what feeds into the greater picture of developing a core product that you can federate at the lowest tactical echelon all the way up to the MEFs that are going to be actually seeing the maneuvers there. So what's the next slide? So some of the initiatives here, also covered these a little bit, is the TAC plug-in development. We provide on-site support around the globe to help with the integration and the warfighter actually learning about the TAC ecosystem. It is fairly new to the Marine Corps as an enterprise. It's not fairly new to the DoD. It was first developed in 2010 by the Air Force Research Laboratory and then quickly adopted by SOCOM, and it is the SOCOM Common Operational Picture of choice. We currently have all MES federated, so on MixIn, N, and S, servers are federated across all of the major subordinate commands. We have also integrated TAC on every single Marine Expeditionary Unit with federation to SOCOM elements. And of course, one of the big initiatives we have is the program of record and the TAC interoperability and integration of such. So the operators, they're not having to buy hardware, they can utilize hardware that they currently have, filled it to them, and just let TAC right on top of it. All of this plays into the greater JADC2, the interoperability issues that we're addressing, and TAC fills quite a role there. And again, it's a free program, it's free software. And I'm going to introduce Eric Perez now, who's leading our JADC2 effort.
All right, good morning, everyone. First off, I want to thank Colonel Clarkson, the CEO for MCTISA, for having the guts to allow somebody like me to stand before you. Because if you know me, you know that I'm about as soft as concrete. So, Captain Eric Perez, I work in the JADC2 Battle Lab. Our main focus is to really explore what we have in our current inventory and try to reconfigure it to meet today's needs. Right? Next slide, please. So, essentially what I said, we're focused on today's problem, developing a today's solution, and then we really start trying to focus on the size, weight, and power. The way we see it in the Battle Lab is that logistics is what's going to eat our lunch out in any sort of EABO type of scenario, right? If it's too big, if it's too heavy, if it needs a quad-con, if it needs a forklift, if it's not a single Marine carried product, we don't want it. If it's 2 cases instead of 1, we don't want it. If it's bigger than me, taller than me, heavier than me, we really don't want it, right? We really are looking to try to get anything that can be transported via an Osprey, or in really, like I said, a 1 Marine lift, right? There's really no reason why we can't do that. It's 2023. Some of the sizes of the CPUs that I've seen out here on the floor, right? I mean, we could do a lot with a lot of those things, and really containerizing a lot of the applications that we're going through. Next slide, please. So, how do we do this? Well, you first start off by finding a really abrasive captain, and then you put him on staff, right? And then you let that captain ask a lot of tough questions and ask why. Just as that simple. Why are we doing that process? Why are we doing that thing, right? The Commandant specifically put out in his planning guidance that we weren't going to let the ATO process and any of the information assurance or any sort of IA policy really hinder our ability to actually conduct business. So we kind of took that to heart, more or less me as a former 0689 cybersecurity technician. So I really started reaching out to a lot of these organizations and asking them like, hey, why is this thing developed in this particular way? And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times it's because they just didn't have a reason to not set it up that way. No one ever really defined what that requirement was all the way down to specific concept of operations, if you will, on why that particular setup did not really work. So I actually started working really heavily with IC4 compliance branch, Mr. Bush, and really starting to kind of get after the ATO process, the authority to operate process, and really start scrutinizing the risk management framework. Because as it is right now, there is no risk management. It's just no, right? That's RMF really is the way we see it now, is that you have to go into any conversation knowing that you're going to get no right back at you. So we really started to kind of put the scenarios into place and really started working with them. And actually, they've been very open to working with us to actually have some sort of like continuous ATO, authority to operate, and try to allow us to actually apply the updates that we need to update, modify certain things, but really identify a lot of the mitigation strategies that we're doing in order to take a current program of record of the way it is, actually taking it out of its current type accreditation and actually putting it in another environment, but overlaying the latest cybersecurity tools to kind of really give them the insight and the warm and fuzzy that they need, their Snuggie at night, so that way they know that it's just not a bunch of Marines actually just doing whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. Because when it comes down to it, when you're out there, that's what's going to happen. No one out in any of my previous deployments cared about an ATO when the CO or whoever the OIC was like, hey, we need to get this thing up right now. All that stuff got thrown out the door, and we got calm up, right? So we're trying to avoid that, so we're really engaging the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, CDNI, and actually really engaging and trying to influence and inform the policymakers to actually like understand what is actually the realness that's actually happening on the ground. So because of our proximity to 1MAF, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, 1st Marine Division, and all those folks, we've actually been able to get back a lot of feedback from them, help actually kind of like abstract what the requirement actually is, and actually help feed Systems Command and CDNI to actually start refining a lot of the older requirements that are out there. Because to be quite honest, a lot of our requirements that we have right now are based from an enemy 10 to 15 years ago, but because of the acquisition cycle, the fielding plans, right? It's just the nature of the game. We get that, but which is why we're trying to focus on, hey, how do we actually bridge that gap and try to close that timeline and get something in now? Because for the vast majority of our program of records, there's little niche things here and there that they do that we do need. However, we just don't need 2 Humvees worth of equipment in order to actually do that, right? It's unrealistic in what we're actually trying to shift our focus to, which is exactly why we shifted away from tanks and why we're even kind of shifting away from even traditional artillery in some cases, right? Next slide. So, we are an active Project Convergence participant. The last 2 years, PC-21 and PC-22, we were heavily engaged with Army Futures Command, Joint Modernization Command, Marine Corps Warfighting Lab as the executing arm for McWill to actually really get after how do we put all the command and control systems, the battle management aids on a single table and just actually do comparative analysis of, hey, is this triangle, what color triangle is that? What are all the fields, the latency behind it, the quality of that type stuff. And right now we are in direct support of the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. Anytime they do any experimentation, we are the first people that they call, not Ghostbusters. And we're the ones that actually go out to those working groups, actually do a lot of the engineering solutions for them, just because of the sheer nature of that organization. They don't have them on staff, whereas we do. We are now partnering with the Land Network Integration Center, which is the Australian MCTISA equivalent. So we're heavily involved in actually trying to get and develop and foster that U.S.-Australia relationship and start actually work like, hey, what systems do they have? They use certain PORs that we actually already have through foreign military sales. So we're just trying to find really some common ground and where can we actually like really, what information can we share? Can we not? And really kind of get into, but But the last bullet right there is really the big thing, and it's one of the things that has been, in my opinion personally, what's been lacking with a lot of the requirements, is that a lot of times you get that telephone game where you have a Marine who has or a organization that has a specific requirement. By the time in that email chain it gets to the people who actually go in and write those, it's completely different. You go in asking for a Mustang and you end up, with a Gremlin on the other side. Why? Well, it's because a lot of that stuff is lost, and some of what TJ brought up, right? There is a huge difference between the individuals at those organizations versus what's actually going on the ground, right? Of what they're used to and them doing communications, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago versus what it is actually now. And so we really try to focus on our proximity to OneMAF, is to really actually get, hey, what are the tactics, what are the procedures, what are the policies, what are they seeing, taking those, turning around, asking those tough questions to the organizations, taking and dismantling, in some instances, program of records, reconfiguring them, and then letting the units actually try them out while we work with IC4 compliance branch to make sure that we're not going to make anybody mad or any program office mad. Obviously, we work very heavily with the program offices. They've been very receptive, so actually we've been it's actually been really nice to actually work with a lot of the program of records. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to think revolutionary and not evolutionary. As we all know, right, CPUs go from 4-core to 8-core to 12-core. What we're looking at is we're trying to go on the extreme end. Is like, hey, traditionally, this is a Humvee. We want to put it in a lunchbox, right? We're trying to take that giant leap forward instead of just continuing doing what we've been doing really for the last, at least for me, the last 21 years in the Marine Corps, of just, it's the same green box. The only thing that's changed is just the PC that's in there. Because going through 4066 school, small computer system specialist, I'm dating myself there, but we went from a desktop tower sideways, and I have proof, right, to now we have data center blades. But I'll be honest with you, a data center blade in a big heavy box is not the answer, right? It is 100% not the answer. We are better than that, and really we're trying to encourage industry to kind of think outside the box and reimagine them of what they would like, what we really think it really should be, to be quite honest, right? But again, those are really the type of goals and projects that we really try to get after. We do it through CRADAs, which is a cooperative research development agreement. Sorry, thank you. But yeah, so we're encouraging industry. If you want to work with us, if you want to actually try to get something out there and collaborate, try to shrink something, try to reconfigure something, we actually have quite a few CRADAs in development with some of the vendors that are out here, and we're very thankful for that. But we're really trying to actually shrink everything down to, like, if it can go in my cargo pocket or in my trouser pocket, like that's the direction that we want to go, and there's really no reason why we can't, because this is America, right? We can do whatever we want because we are, in my opinion, right, some of the lead innovators in how we actually do business, right, globally. But with that, I think that is the last slide. Oh, actually, no, it's not. Sorry, when I said that they trusted me, they didn't let me actually make the slides. Okay, these are definitely not the slides that I originally had up here. But with that being said, we do try to take an OODA loop approach to how we actually do things. So when I was speaking earlier about interfacing with the MEF, we observe what the MEFs are doing. We look at their procedures of what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. We then try to orient, okay, who are the organizations that we need to engage and actually kind of get after it. And then I make the decision. Really, it's me who just starts doing things in parallel as asking for permission. And hopefully those two converge at some point. And then when we act, we actually go back to the unit and say, hey, try this new thing. Let us know what you think. Provide us feedback. And that's actually what we've been doing with the requirements. Is like we give every vendor the opportunity to go out. We reconfigure the exact same setup in different hardware chassis, different hardware cases, and we give them to different units. We take all that feedback back, and then we give them to Marine Corps Systems Command, and we kind of let them make the decision on which direction we need to go from a financial standpoint. And we really start actually scrutinizing some of the hidden costs that are there, because it's not just maybe the server size, but it's where you can slide that server in, and how interoperable is it between our different platforms, and can we do that, right? So I think this is the last slide. All right. So now we're going to open the floor for questions for us.
Good morning, Artie Lewis. I work for Oracle, and in my other life, I'm an Intel officer. Fantastic way of pushing the decision down to the tactical edge. My question is, as we proliferate these type of technologies, we kind of increase the threat surface because we lose control of the transport, right? And also, there's a lot more user that's feeding into the cop. The question is, how do we ensure that the information we're getting are not things like deep fakes or misinformation, right, that somebody's planted because we don't have control of that, the whole stack, if you will.
If I understand your question, it sounds like you're asking how are we validating non-repudiation between the information that is actually leaving the systems and getting to its intended location. So, as you heard, we do have a Mar4 Cyber recognized blue team. That's actually one of the big questions that we've had. And even as most recent, just 2 weeks ago, at the J6, we were asking those type of questions. Is that, hey, how do we start incorporating non-repudiation between the systems, and what technology can we actually leverage to ensure that when you receive a specific message, that it's actually coming from an authorized message source, right, from that application, so that way when you receive it on the distant end, there you have a finer level of fidelity of knowing that, like, hey, when you got a call for fire, that it's actually from the system it's supposed to be coming from, and not just a rogue floating packet. Some of you may know where that's from, but actually reaching your system.
Correct. So we want to make sure that that packet is not intercepted, and also the source is a valid source, right? Intel guy again, right? I'm very pessimistic about the data I'm getting. I want to make sure that it's the right data, because what we're essentially doing when we're doing things like TAC, we're pushing the decision cycle down, and we're reducing the OODA loop, right, in terms of response time. So I want to make sure that that decision is the right decision based on the correct information or the correct picture I'm having. So that was what my point was.
So to answer that, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to data lake a lot of that information and actually conduct correlation at the lowest level possible, right? A single source for a specific thing is probably not going to give the commander the best warm and fuzzy that he needs in order to make that decision. So what we're doing is we're actually trying to push cloud, AI, ML type of technology as far down the chain as it can. So that way, when you do receive that data, you have that ability to do what correlation you need in order to then actually be able to bounce that off different sources. So that way that quality of whatever that track was or object that you're tracking is actually finer than just what traditionally would be, hey, a single source, it's sending it into the common operational picture, and then having somebody risk whether or not they want to make a decision based on that source.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Brian Scullin, ForcePoint. So as a prior Syscom guy and in school with you as a data guy, leaning forward in technology is absolutely fantastic, right? It's great, but what is McTissa leveraging, working with Syscom doing to actually accelerate the acquisition process? Because you're looking at technology now that can have a direct impact on warfighters, but getting into a POR, developing requirements through CD&I, and getting that into an acquisition cycle could literally take 2 to 3 years. So leaning forward in technology is great, but how is the acquisition side trying to keep up with that type of that advance?
So
I think I can take this one. So what we've got a couple of initiatives we got going on. Again, I think Captain Perez talked about the CRADA initiative that we got. So McTissa again was just recognized as a technical activity. So that's one way we're trying to bring in technology to be able to start informing the program offices. The other thing we're looking at is that in our current paradigm, the way that we traditionally say, hey, there's a new thing, I need to do a new program of record to now host that new thing. That's not a survivable approach at all. So what we need to look at is how we refine the terminology and the approach to tech refreshes, right? If that system meets a capability if we already have a requirement for that, a validated requirement of CD&I, and this system can meet that capability, it's not a new program, it's a refresh to an existing program. We need to stop using programs of records. We treat programs of record, we're in an inflection point where we've treated programs of record like a tank, right? It's a whole thing, or an aircraft, right? When we're talking about software, well, that's modular. I can move that wherever I need to move it, right? So if I'm really just taking out this capability that I wanted to do that was specific to the land domain, right? But now I need to do it in the maritime domain, but the capability is still there. It's really I'm just taking out that component and replacing it with another component. So we've got the CRADA initiative with program PM Command and Control. They're doing a couple of studies right now that I think in the next couple of months we're going to start seeing they're going to actually try and exercise, hey, can I refresh a current program of record and still maintain that capability? So then it lowers the threshold, right? I don't necessarily have to go back to Congress to say, hey, I want to do a new thing. It's really I'm still executing to my fit up, right? I'm already executing to the plan. I'm now just looking at different upgrades, and we do that all the time when we go from Windows 10 to Windows MT. We've done that. We don't have to go back to Congress every time I change the operating system. I shouldn't have to go back to Congress every time I want to say, hey, there's a more effective C2 capability, right? It's still a map. It's still an overlay. I don't need to go to Congress for that. I just say, hey, this is a better thing for me. It meets some of the criteria I need to do in a modern battlefield, and just go. Right, so we're exercising that now. We'll find out how it works out, and if the three of us get assigned to tactical brooms the next year, then you know it failed. But if not, then I think we got a good way to go.
I'm going to add two things. The first thing is our relationship with R&D and S&T now allows us to collect data. It allows us to do combat evaluation. So the enterprise can write requirements as we're testing, as we're evaluating a technology. So far it's been very successful. There's someone in the audience that helped with one of our very first combat evaluations that most of you probably be familiar with, Satellite as a Service, Ground Link 16. A couple of those, now becoming programs of record, but we have the data, we have the analytics that drive decisions and allows the enterprise to make a decision faster.
And I want to add on that is that one of the other things that actually TJ really, he kind of hit on it, but I'm going to say it in a different way, is that we're trying to steer the program of records to separate themselves from hardware, right? So as soon as we remove the software from the hardware and we actually start doing a hard budgetary analysis of what the hardware is, the one thing that we're finding is that, believe it or not, it's actually cheaper for us to go with faster processors, better RAM, more storage, than it is for trying to just meet the minimum requirement for whatever that compute and store is, right? So when we actually start looking at that and we go from, let's say, what traditionally would have been a 16-core processor on a particular server, and hey, it's actually cheaper to go with a 32-core. Well, now the life cycle of that hardware is now larger than what it was, so we can actually potentially find ourselves refreshing a lot less frequently and just upgrading software as we need, because that's really what it comes down to, right? But those are some of the type of data analytics that we really try to take a look at. When I spoke earlier about the hidden costs, it's like, hey, sometimes we're kind of putting ourselves in a broom closet when in reality we really should be in a convention center when it comes to the amount of compute and store that we can actually bring to the tactical edge.
Good morning, Steve Calhoun. I work with Lockheed Martin. Appreciate your comments, very informative this morning. My question, two-part. The first part's a bit of an observation. So TJ talked to standards, and then I think, Captain Perez, what you were just saying. So I'd like to get your thoughts on things like a CMOS architecture, if you're familiar with.
Yes.
The C5ISR modern open systems sensors architecture driven by SOSA, the consortium. It seems to be part of the answer. I mean, everybody's wanted plug and play for 40, 50 years. I was an old SIGINT EW operator back in the day. It's something that a lot of times there aren't standards, right? So it seems to be heading in that direction. Hopefully the Marine Corps sees benefit in that. And then really the second part of that question is MEGFOS, and are you working with the program offices on MEGFOS, right? Is that's a new program? I know there's sort of a recapitalization of things going into that, but is that something that MCTISA is working with to help define those standards and bring that to fruition?
So it's not something I'm working on. I don't know if any of the two of you are working on it.
That is something that I have engaged the J6, right? Not to throw it back in their court, but trying to find a lot of times, right? When it comes down to it, JADC2 and the military-industrial complex don't always agree, right? It doesn't. everybody has their own proprietary protocol, their application, their own thing, and a lot of times what happens is we end up putting ourselves in a corner with a specific protocol or message format or message type, and then we have to find a band-aid solution to try to get, let's say, from a VMF to a J-series message type of scenario. So we at least try to influence the policymakers. So like, hey, when it comes down to a standard protocol for a specific thing, we do try to work with them, and it's part of the creative thing that we're trying to like get more involved with. We are looking at like a CMOS type of a la carte menu of, hey, maybe we don't need the whole kit and caboodle, but you do have one CMOS component that we really would like to see in this other thing. So we do try to work with industry and try to at least provide some feedback to those type of things. But to be quite honest, that is probably a cheaper and better way for us to go, a CMOS construct a la carte type of hardware like process. It'd be really no different than trying to containerize a lot of our applications, so you don't end up having to worry about redoing the whole, let's say a virtual infrastructure, for example, right? You just update that one container and actually try to do a more of a DevSecOps approach to that.
And I'll also say too about developing to the standards, where I think where Rick and Eric are also seeing is that, I know Eric's saying, hey, where the standards have their limitations. Again, like I said earlier, standards are really just policy. Just a bunch of people in the room said, hey, let's decide on this, and everybody else looked around and said, sounds cool to me. We're going to do that, right? But I think what they're seeing a lot of places, like for example, COT has cursor on target has just become a standard, but it was implemented way before that as kind of the de facto of functionality. But I think what McTISA is being able to do in its new paradigm is with the data that we're collecting, saying, hey, that standard is no longer seeing utility, and we're able to inform those decision makers, hey, you need to start looking somewhere else, or the programs that you've kind of baked this into will break. And you're seeing it real time, where the proliferation of TAC in the Marine Corps and its current programs of record that we fund are now being deprecated because they don't solve the problem that the Marines want. So I think that's does that help? So yeah, I think that's kind of where I see it. So, but standards give you a good start point for industry if you want to get in the door. Right, believe it or not, I'm not really a standards person, but if you want to get in the door, MarCore Syscom really loves it when you say it. So I would say have those available to you, so that way you can get in the door and then say, hey, here's how I do it. If you do that first, it makes it easier.
Okay, great, thank you.
How you guys doing? Charlie Rosario with Force Point. I did have a question. So back when I was wearing the cloth, my point of contention was always, there was always programs of records and stuff that was taught at the schoolhouse or taught at the CTC, but then you see stuff that would just pop up and they were like, here, Marine. And the answer I always hated was just figure it out. And I'm like, that's great, but if we're talking about that 23-year-old that you mentioned or that 18-year-old, that's great, but it slows things down. It really slows things down. So where's the gap in between the TCOM element? Because I understand I know that's their wheelhouse, but like, where's some type of gap that McTISA, because you guys are the cutting edge, right?
I'm chomping on the bit on that one. I'm ready. I'm ready for this one.
To close that gap so that if it's not a program of record, or like Captain Perez said, it's not fast enough, how are we going to make it that gap so that the units are effective, they're efficient, they're on the ball faster?
So I'll take part of this, because I actually in the last week I just started working with TCOM and started doing analysis on TNR standards. Right, you got to train to the standard. Right, Marines are going to get promoted to the standard. Right, that's bottom line. Right, so I'm going to be. You could be the greatest DevSecOps 03XX, right, but you can't shoot straight. So I don't care what code you make. That's not the standard. That's not what it is. So what we've been doing, I've been working with Major Chris Rock. That's a real name. Look it up. So I've been working with him on some of the stuff, on some of the standard stuff. The biggest challenge that we have in the C2 space is, number one, the Marine Corps doesn't have a C2 MOS, right? If you look at the Navy has the OS rate, so they have operational specialists that live in that space. We don't have that. So that's what happens to the Marine. It says, hey, use this. Also, the COCOM gets a vote, right? The Marine Corps trains to a standard, man, equip and train to the standard, and provides forces to the COCOM. And the COCOM will say, hey, I know what you train to, but this is what I need to execute this mission, and you will hand this. And then what you see it down at the regimental or the battalion or the company level is, hey, Devil Dog, here's this new box that you've never seen before, and you got 15 minutes to figure it out because we got to get back to this. Because the CO's got to do a thing, right? So that's reality. So there's two. I call POR program of record and program of reality, right? And the Marines typically deal with programs of reality. Right. So when we talk through that, we've got to look at the standards and say, hey, we have to have a real discussion. Well, we, the Marine Corps, those in uniform, need to have a real discussion about, hey, when we look at the standards, we look at the TNR, there's two things, right? There's E-coded, which is the irreducible minimum floor, right? That's what you have, and that's reportable, right? If you look at anything if you do a search on the TNR standards in COM, you look at an infantry, and you look at in C2, all the standards for C2 are not E-coded, so they are not part of the irreducible minimum standard for a unit to be determined to be combat mission effective, right? So that's a discussion that's not a MCTISA discussion per se, but the impact to us is that when I decide to set up a test environment and I say, hey, I'm going to test to this, and I'm a scientist, right? So as a scientist, I'm going to say, here are the standards, here's the program of record, here are the policies, and it works like this. Yep. Well, I can make all this stuff. Like if you put the three of us in a room, right? I can go anywhere and it's always going to work, and you're going to see it do stuff it's never seen before, right? Just like the contractors when you were forward deployed would come in and make it do stuff you've never seen it do before, right? And then it stopped working the minute they left, right? So that's reality. But the reason that is not because the Marines didn't know how to do it or weren't capable. That skill set is not part of the irreducible minimum standard for a Marine to be effective, which means I'm not going to get promoted. My unit's not mission. Those skills are not part of what my unit needs to be deployable, right? That's not what they're focusing on. So if they're not focusing on that, I'm not going to get promoted for that, right? So what that ends up being is that 0331 with a GT score of 7 sprained his leg on a hump, and now he's your cop manager, right? Good luck on those Chinese missiles that are coming, right? That's how it plays out, right? But that's how. So as we look at this, what we're seeing again here at MCTISA is that, hey, there is a gap between the technology that you're getting. We're getting the overmatch internally with our own technology and what we're expecting the Marines to do. So again, I'm probably going to tactical brooms for that. But again, I think that the uniform really needs to look at the standards, look at what's E-coded and what's not E-coded, and then say, hey, now that I'm moving from a coin environment to a near peer environment, do these standards need to be adjusted, and where do I do trade-offs in that to ensure, because I don't want to put more days of training. This is not to say you need more training. This is us, just like we divested of tanks. We need to say, this training may no longer be as effective as I need it to be, and that might be the OJT stuff, but I need to bring in this skill set because that's what I need this Marine to be able to do it to be at the minimum level of effectiveness for this unit, right? So again, I leave you with that. If you guys have access to TNR manuals, it's really fun to read through them and find out what's E-coded and not E-coded, and that'll tell you what your Marines will be able to do.
And my comments mainly for the ones in uniform and audience. So we have a 24/7 helpline. We have a website that gets 5,000 clicks a day. We have progressive web apps that you can take gigs and gigs of data in a disconnected environment, right? So the answers are there, and I think TCOM's actually it depends on the complexity of a system whether or not it makes it to a CTC and how fast that happens. Just within the last 365 on our TAC campaign, TCOM has already reached out, figuring out how they can get TAC some sort of curriculum in the schoolhouse and where. For what that's worth, I mean, we can't help a unit, that wants to buy something. But we are the middleman in regards to fielding from S&T and R&D establishments.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Only thing I'll add to that is yes. Everything will always snap back to the lowest common denominator, and that's that Lance Corporal, right? It doesn't matter. I can tell you from experience, I've brought a lot of the products that are in this room into a tactical data center, and it takes one PCS cycle, right? And it all reverts right back to where it was before. It always does. So what we at least try to do is we encourage the units who are going to go out and spend their unit funds on some sort of application, product, hardware, is to at least interface with us and let us know beforehand, because there's a very, very high probability that we've already done an assessment on that particular product Like TJ said, we have the highest concentration of advanced degrees to uniformed personnel in the Marine Corps. And you'd be surprised what I have found on the share drive. Like there's assessments on applications that, like, when I was in 1MEF, I always wondered, like, hey, has anybody looked at this? Well, it turns out somebody had. It's just, right, no one bothered to ask that question. So we do at least try to engage the units and let them know, like, hey, before you buy anything, before you commit any funds, please talk to us, let us know. Maybe we can kind of like help you out, and if anything, at least steer you probably in a better direction than what you think you might be actually receiving, and actually kind of go over a lot of those hidden costs that you may not be really thinking about. And we do try to stick to the whole DOTM OPF, the training, the training education command standard of trying to find common things, and if it's something that's within the realm of at least lasting one PCS cycle, then you'll probably get a head nod from us.
One last question, and it really is the elephant in the room. So ATAC, 350,000 users since being deployed, right? For many of the companies in here that develop tactical software, how do you see ATAC as a ecosystem, and for the developers in here working with that moving forward with the Marine Corps in the future?
Okay, so are you asking how you can develop a capability to utilize inside the ecosystem?
Okay, so for example, well, I don't want to necessarily start naming off applications, right?
Sure.
But there are certain program of records out there already, and ATAC is free.
Yes.
So these guys are all in here to make money. So how do you compete with software that's government subsidized, right? When the industry's trying to sell software back to the government.
Yeah. So
what's the business model there?
Yeah, for sure. And there's always going to be a need for vendor development, right? And the vendor involvement and procuring and fielding the most recent technology. ATAC is just a open source government off-the-shelf software, right? So you can develop a plugin for whatever program office you may be tasked for, right? In conjunction with what you're already tasked to field, right? This is just an ecosystem that is available, very scalable, and has a continuous delivery that's safe and secure. So of course, programs of record, they may not just, what they palm and what they get from Congress, and they're not going to just drop what they're doing and throw all their money at TAC, right? That doesn't make sense. The development of core capabilities, the development of modernizing capabilities that are currently fielded, scaling things down to whether or not it makes sense at an Android or a Windows or HTML or at the TAC server base. So I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think TAC is and when we first started the campaign that has raised such an awareness over the last 365, programs of record, did see it as competition and not a capability. And it took a lot of head turning. It actually took Colonel Clarkson to be that, the 06 for the Marine Corps to sit on the board for people to realize, like, all right, this is a capability. This is what the Marines want. Just imagine, you all field something that does something, and it has its own UI. Well, TAC ecosystem has the same UI, from handheld to Windows to HTML.
And I think that's what I'm trying to bring up there, is that ATAC is a complementary thing to this, because I think a lot of industry partners right now look at ATAC as competition, but it's really not. It's something that we should look at as complementary, right?
Absolutely, and if you have it, go to tac.gov. If you have a government representative, they can sponsor you. You can get inside of the DevSecOps pipeline and start developing a plugin now. So it's just more in your pocket, right? It's more capability when you go to these trade shows to show, like, I have this really cool thing, and it talks to TAC. And if you go to SoftWorks, in SoftInc down in Tampa, everything you see there has a TAC plugin. Everyone wants, that ability to integrate with what's working and what's making the news. And for the Marine Corps, it just took nearly 10 years for TAC to really, be an enterprise solution. It's been at the Anglicos, it's been at the Recons and the MARSOCs, and it's been around. But now, you got the users at the tactical edge that are going to be bouncing around islands, needing to ride on local infrastructure. There's not a lot of things that do that as well as TAC right now.
Hey, good morning, Jason Pete, Dell Technologies. Good to see you, Eric, Rick, TJ. Appreciate it. It's phenomenal to hear how much is changing with Commandant's planning guidance in Force 9 2030 with rapid acquisition and that process. Are you seeing that OODA loop changing with the RFI and the requirements being written like after your guys' feedback to like the NIWICs and the Naval Surface Warfare Center? So that requirement's kind of agile being developed and reiterated, right?
So yes. When I mentioned earlier of how open and the willingness to work by the Navy Information Warfare Center, both Atlantic and Pacific, like I meant it. Like they're actually very interested in the ideas that we have and trying to get more of an operational assessment of what the requirements actually means to them, because you'd be surprised to find that a lot of those individuals that actually engineer those solutions are not prior service. They've never worn the cloth. These are college kids who got a job and were giving a bunch of documents and told, hey, build this thing, and they have no operational context of, hey, how is this thing going to actually get employed? But those same individuals are very open. They actually reach out on a routine basis, interface with us, talk to us, and that's where we're actually trying to bring the proximity of one MEF and the direct line that we have to the NIWICs, and actually like allow them to see what they're actually doing, so that way it'll help influence the designs of a lot of the stuff that they're actually working on.
And we make all of our data as far as like what the warfighter is actually reporting. It's available to anyone with a CAC card. You can go to our website, you hit system statistics, you can do your own queries the last year if you want to know something about ground radios. All of that data is right there by MEF down to the minute of support provided. The solution, the root cause, the service provided, it's all there. So we don't hide our data. We want the supporting establishments to see it, because data, like I mentioned earlier, drives decisions.
Sure. I guess the last part is, it's awesome to see MCTISA kind of like spearheading that, and it's the warm and fuzzy is the other half of the other sections of it, right? With SysCom and CD&I, is the requirements getting refined in more of a agile environment by that traditional waterfall thing.
So on the back end, there is more of a waterfall process that's happening, but it's really happening with our current programs of record, which have not necessarily optimized to where we're going to be. But what you'll start to see, we started last year, is you're going to start to see more RFIs. There was an RFI that was sent out, I don't know, maybe summertime, and you're going to see more. What you're going to see more than you've seen less is kind of more RFIs, right? For the last couple of years, last 2 decades, really, right? The Marine Corps kind of said, hey, here's my favorite pet rock, and we're going to stick with that pet rock forever. And now they're starting to say, well, that pet rock may not be. It might just really just be a rock, right? They might. So now you're starting to see those RFIs. So I would expect as the program officers starting to ask questions and they're like, hey, can we do? You're going to see more RFIs come out. You may not see the response you like out of those RFIs, but those RFIs are coming out. They are influencing some discussion in the C2 space. But I would urge you, as you see those RFIs come out, respond to them and continue to engage in the RFI process, because that will help. I will tell you, if you do respond to those RFIs, it is shaping what will fall into RFPs. I can tell you that there's a direct line between, hey, this RFI is telling me what's in the art of the possible, and then you'll start to see that form up in RFPs. And I think we'll see that. To send you guys out a little candy, I think you guys will see that in the next 6 to 7 months.
Awesome. And I guess last shameless plug, just want to say, with a lot of stuff you guys are doing with the technology and the programs of record and with industry, the MCTISA deployed support and help desk is, I would say, almost taking over the mission of the McCog deployed support team, really so much so. And then, again, shameless plug for that.
Don't tell that to the McCog.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for this engaging discussion. I'm going to put you guys on the spot and say that you will be available afterwards for folks that still have questions. How about a round of applause for TJ, Rick, and Eric? And for Eric, from your Air Force brethren, I've never met a soft Marine, so all the Marines I know are hard. All right. We're going to transition to our next panel here in about 5 minutes, so thank you for your support today.